Unprecedented step to
Hey, Alex.
the Department of Defense to use healthcare personnel to operate all COVID facilities at the Javits Center in New York, at the Convention Center in New Orleans.
Yes.
Could you mute your mic?
Yep.
We informed the governors of those states today that their request, we are making those military personnel available to operate COVID facility.
Oops, I unmuted again.
All right, we'll give it just another minute for people to hop on here real quick, and then we'll get started. All right, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started, and there might be some people jumping in as we go, and that's perfectly fine. But thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. This is our third chapter chat now. It's something we've started up due to the circumstances, but I think that we'll be continuing this after, just to kind of give general updates to chapters, give a chance to ask questions as we go, but it works out really well for the situations we're all facing right now. So tonight we're going to cover a couple different topics. In general, it's just going to be focused on chapter operations and how we're going to proceed with the majority of chapters now working in a virtual climate. To help me tonight, we have three different speakers: Neil Bussett, Sandia Cannon, and Natalie Turco. Two of them are on our student advisory board, and Neil Bussett has been a District 16 director for a little while now. So they'll be helping me out with some presentations that their working groups have prepared for you all over the last 2 weeks to get some best practices going. On the call as well, we have a couple of other headquarters staff that will be helping me out and just kind of facilitating any conversation. You can use the chat tool that Google Hangouts has. I believe it's in the top right corner of your screen to ask questions throughout the presentation. Dylan or Pat could answer those, and if there are any questions that they're unable to answer, I'll be happy to do so at the end of the session. As you hop in, if you have your mics on, just go ahead and mute those for now, and then if there's any questions, we'll cover those at the end. So just an agenda as we get going tonight, we're going to cover, as I said, a few different topics for operations. We're going to talk about how to approach the requirement of the report of election to evaluate exemplary character, best practices for virtual meetings, our recommendations to complete virtual voting for your elections, ratification ballots, and everything going forward. We're going to talk about an alternative solution that we've prepared to collect initiation fees, and then we'll give a chance for everybody to have their questions answered at the end. A few guidelines as we get started going into this chat, and for all of our chats, this presentation is being recorded, mainly just so we can provide the chapters and officials who don't have a chance to be here a video afterward. Make sure to keep your line muted as we go. Ask questions in the chat windows I was talking about. And everything from this presentation will be provided after to refer back to, and for those who couldn't make it, to refer to. A few announcements before we get into the general discussion. Headquarters is now closed through April 14th, and that's probably going to be extended through April 30th. There are, each of us are still trying to work remotely, doing what we can. Most of us have the capability to handle all reports and member services and everything away from the office, and trying to monitor emails and phones as if we were still there. That does lead to some delays with shipping and such of different supplies that we can talk about, but we're trying to get everything going back on that as soon as we can. The online initiation ceremony, we passed out, or via email, a request form for each of you to fill out. If you fill that out, we provide the information through secured passwords and secured links to be able to access the ritual instructions. If you've not gotten that, we've got the link right here to access, but if you need that sent to you or anything, we can also do that via email. And I believe we've got the form posted on the Google site, I think. I may be speaking out of turn there, but if it's not, I'll make sure that it is. So moving right along, Sandia is going to kick us off with the first topic, talking about exemplary character and her evaluation, what her working group has prepared. And I'm going to get those slides pulled up real quick. And Sandia, if you're on the call, you can unmute and go right ahead, and you can just let me know when to proceed.
Thank you, Alex. Hey, everyone. Hope you're all doing okay. So I wanted to discuss with you a little bit about the virtual character evaluation process. My group and I, Christina, Annie, and Daniel, we put together some general guidelines and resources that you can refer to, not only as you shift to online learning, but also maybe to use this as an opportunity to revamp what you're currently doing for your chapter's character evaluation process. So you can go forward there. So just to touch upon what you might have in your traditional character evaluation process, it's taking place generally after your academic eligibility is determined. And you might include some components like mandatory campus event attendance, face-to-face interviews, a member vote at a chapter meeting with a discussion on the candidates, and faculty recommendation letters. Tau Beta Pi, we're looking to find, in terms of the character evaluation process, seeing if members and candidates are holding up the integrity and excellence in engineering. So a lot of these methods are great ways for that process, but we're looking to see how we can transfer them to a digital platform. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel though, so a lot of these can be reused. So we just want to touch upon some things that you can do to make it easier as you transition to online learning. So you can click again, Alex. And so some of these components that we're looking at, I think from PowerPoint to Google Slides changed it around a little bit, but event attendance, interviews, and member and faculty recommendation were some of the areas that we're pushing in. And if you go to the next slide, into our recommended character evaluation process. So we have virtual interviews, a digital recommendation questionnaire, online resume submission, and virtual event requirements. So we've put together some documents and with guidelines and resources about all of these topics for you, but I'll just go through a quick overview right now. So for virtual interviews, you'll see later on the virtual meetings group will touch upon the remote conferencing platforms, and I know a lot of you might be using one already through your universities. But once you select a remote conferencing platform, it can be very easy to just select a sign up, send out a sign up form to all of your candidates with half-hour time slots, and they can sign up for a certain time to have a remote interview. Now, this will probably depend on the size of your chapter, the number of candidates, and the availability of everyone on your officer board, but these interviews can be one-on-one or with the entire officer board. So you can see how that availability and chapter size works out. Maybe if you have a larger number of initiates or candidates, it might not work out to have the entire officer board schedule times to meet with every single candidate, and it can be easier to split it up and have one-on-one interviews. So sending out that form and putting these together would be a great way to get that interview process in. And while I know some chapters might already be doing something like this, if you aren't, an interview can be a great way to get to know the candidate and learn about their character. We've put together, if you go to the next slide, Alex, please, just some sample interview questions that you can refer to, either to maybe add to the existing interview process you already have or to create a new one, ranging between some professional questions, actually, asking why they want to be a member, what they're looking to get out of it, and more abstract questions to help you get an idea of their values, character, and their passion to be a member of Tau Beta Pi. So this document will be included on the chapter resources that will go onto the webpage. So we'll go to the next area, which is a recommendation questionnaire. So right now, maybe a lot of chapters might include a component of their evaluation process, including requesting recommendation letters to be submitted by faculty. Working with the group, we felt maybe including some more flexibility in that during this time might be a great way to ensure you get more responses and make it easier for everyone involved. So opening it up to faculty, their supervisors, for campus or otherwise jobs, fellow Tau Bates, or members of the community. And the easiest way to get these recommendations can come from a digital form, which can be sent out to candidates so they can request recommendations from someone and have them submit the form digitally to a chapter email by a set deadline. So if you go to the next slide, Alex, we have put together for you a sample recommendation questionnaire, just very basic, going through the applicant's name, the referee, their relationship to the applicant, and a few other details, and a very simple way of evaluating the character of the candidates with different elements of their character on the left, and we have just a 1 to 5 scale, and we have room for comments at the bottom and instructions to return the form to the chapter. So this will be included as a Word editable file as well, so feel free to adopt this form per your chapter's needs and make any changes to tailor it to the way your evaluation process will work. But this can be a great quick way to get that character evaluation process, especially now if you're in a part of the semester where you're trying to get everything done soon and get it on time, and maybe the interview process might be too time consuming. This can be a great way to get that in and have it quick and still have a good measure of the candidate's character. So next we have resume submission, which seems pretty straightforward, might be something you're already doing, but can be good to ask candidates for a resume that's tailored to this purpose, highlighting their community involvement or leadership, areas that showcase their character and their leadership skills. These resumes can be submitted online, to email or an online database, and asking for this resume to be submitted prior to the interview, if you do choose to hold those, can help prime interview conversations and lead that conversation in a good direction. So always a good component and can be used in addition to any of the other elements if you already are or not. And last but not least, we wanted to talk about virtual event requirements. So that might be the biggest area, which a lot of people have had event requirements on campus, requiring candidates to attend a bench signing or any number of events that they're holding. In this case, shifting to online learning platforms, having virtual events can be a great way, whether they're professional development events, academic, or social. Inviting not only the candidates, but also the members lets you keep your engagement up during this online campus and tumultuous period, but also have it as an element of your character evaluation process. So we wanted to put together for you all just some ideas and suggestions of virtual events in each of these 3 categories. So you can showcase the benefits of being a member, learn more about their academic skills, and show it in a social setting. So for professional development, we have some suggestions: holding an alumni panel, getting in touch with your local alumni chapter. Sometimes it can be difficult working with alumni chapter or any external partners when you're on campus because with timing and travel, but now it's virtual, so it could be a lot easier. See if they can call in, set up a conference call, and they can come talk about what they're doing and get involved with your chapter that way. Similarly, an industry partnership, a lot of people who are now working from home. And so if you have either alumni or any industry connections, perhaps through your university's career services, reach out to them, see if they'd be willing to call in and do a little talk or lead a discussion with your candidates and members. Another area event that might be cool for a character evaluation could be a TED Talk discussion. In our suggested resources document, we've put together a list of a few interesting TED Talks, but having a group conference call, playing some talks, and having a discussion afterwards can be a great way to get to know what everyone is thinking about, learn about some interesting topics, and have good interaction with all of your candidates. In the academic category, giving a kind of event that's mandatory but is also beneficial to candidates could be something like a resume workshop, where officer board members or current members could help the candidates work on their resumes or improve their resumes, tailoring it to any specific applications they're working on right now. Peer tutoring would be great, especially when campuses are online, and even for K to 12. If you know schools that would need help that you might have a good connection with near your universities, that can be a good option. And FE exam prep sessions, even though things are kind of on hold right now, eventually things will keep coming up. So if you have members and candidates looking to take the fundamentals of engineering exam, there are online resources. We've included links on our document that you can put together a quick group study session or a prep session. And don't forget about social events. That was something that we wanted to include as well. It can be a great way to get to know the candidates outside of their academic and professional experiences and credentials. So having something like an online game night where you use any number of these online game collaborative platforms, a paint night where you play a video and have everyone paint on their own end, or a group hangout, kind of informal virtual happy hours as you might be seeing popping up here and there. Have everyone grab their own snacks, come together, get to know your candidates, and invite current members so you can keep member engagement up as well. So these are just some areas that we put together for you, and any of these can be mandatory events so that you have something in place of what you normally do on campus. The next slide shows just a sample of the document that we have, which goes into more detail, has suggested links and suggested videos and resources that you can use when planning these events. So all of these documents that I've showed have been, will be on the chapter resources webpage. So overall, best of luck. Not sure what happened, but okay, best of luck with putting this together. We'll have a general guidelines document we put together as well, and this presentation will be there. And just a casual plug, if you need additional support or any individualized mentorship for your chapter, please do reach out to the Student Advisory Board. They do have the chapter mentoring initiative that we've been doing for a few years now. So if you need some extra support or on specific areas, you can send them an email, sab.officers@tbp.org, and reach out. They'll be happy to help. So good luck and take care. Stay safe.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. And for anybody that has any questions for her, feel free to drop those in the chat to directly ask. Like she mentioned, all those resources will be in the will be posted on the online Google site afterward. And my apologies, I've failed to kind of give an introduction. Sandia is former president of our SAB. She's a member of New York Omicron, and she graduated in 2017 with a degree in chemical and molecular engineering. She held the offices of president and recording secretary. While a student, has served as a chapter advisor since graduating. She joined the SAB in 2017 and served as secretary, vice chair, and chair before becoming an SAB advisor this year. She attended the past 4 conventions and currently works for Johnson & Johnson Consumer R&D after earning her master's degree from Columbia University.
Thanks, Alex. And yeah, like you said, if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat or reach out. Thanks.
Okay. Let's see, is Neil online?
Yes, I am. I don't know why I'm unknown in this thing, but I am. And I emailed you the presentation. I didn't realize we were emailing, so it's in your box.
Give me just 1 second then. I'm gonna pull it up right now. Sorry about that. Okay, appearing now for you?
Yep.
Got it. Okay. And just to get started, guys, I'll give you guys an introduction for Neil. Neil's a member of the California Xi chapter at San Diego State University. He graduated in 2009 with a degree in electrical engineering. He held the offices of vice president and corresponding secretary while a student and has served as chapter advisor since graduating. He became a District 16 director in Southern California in 2012. He's attended each convention since 2009 and currently works as a systems engineer at Northrop Grumman, sorry.
That's okay. Hi, guys. So first off, I just want to welcome you all to virtual voting. Virtual voting is, I mean, it's certainly not nearly as fun as character evaluation, but we'll get through it. I want to start by thanking both Lauren and Alec, who are my compatriots on this working group. We've done a lot of good work, I think, and we hope you all enjoy it and it is valuable to you. But I could not be here without the two of them, so I just want to take the time to thank them right now. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Alex. That's going to bug me with both of you having similar names. All right.
Yep.
All right. Alec is in here too, so he's going to, if I say, yeah, okay, anyway. Okay, so we started off with a working group approach of all y'all have chapters, have voting systems that work for you in person. And now we're transitioning all of them online. And everybody has a very different online resources. Some of your schools have Zoom, some of your schools have Google, some of your schools have Skype, whatever. And so everybody has different resources available to them, and everybody had probably maybe not very different, but different voting systems that worked for them in the past. And so what we decided to do was give you the tools to evaluate your own situations so that you can, as engineers, make the best choices for you going forward that are personalized to your chapter. So we did this by giving you the requirements for the various types of voting. We made up some best practices for online voting. We gave some examples like, you know, this chapter used to do this, and now this is the way that we would recommend they do their online thing. And we also provided some introductory questions that you as officers can answer, which will help you get down the path towards what your voting solution is. And so I guess overall, the summary, the takeaway of this is try to best reflect how your chapter already conducts its voting business with the various tools that you have available to you. So go ahead and go to the next slide. So voting needs that we covered are mostly the first three, which is ratification ballot, candidate elections, and officer elections. Those are the big voting things. Obviously, there are other voting for regular business meetings, like chapter bylaws and motions and fees and assessments and all that other stuff. We do touch on that briefly, but we're really focused on the big first three. Also, throughout all this, and no, that's the next slide. Never mind. Is make sure, since you're changing your process, make sure you explain it to your members beforehand so they know exactly what's going on, and make sure you cover the corner cases. If you're going to do voting that's, you know, in an online video and you have people raise their hands, that's great, except for the people who are calling in on the phone and don't have video. So you need to provide the corner cases, make sure you cover all your bases so people who don't necessarily have video can still participate. You don't want to disenfranchise people. And so we discuss the times where that might be an issue and provide some recommendations as well. Go to the next slide. So the biggest things that our working group provided is we have a document. This presentation is actually not the document. We have a document. It's like 25 some odd pages long, but don't worry, it's split up in headings and things. Yeah, I saw that, Natalie. It's split off in headings and things. And so if you're only worried about, you know, doing candidate elections, then you could just read the candidate election stuff. You don't have to read the whole thing. You need to read the introduction at the beginning, which covers some ground rules, and then you can skip right onto the voting you're doing and the methods that you think you're going to use to do it to read about them. So the document discusses, like I said, those other things, the questions, requirements, best practices, examples. It also summarizes each voting methodology. So we did actually spend the time on looking into and investigating all of these lovely technology things, which I'm listed, and I'm not going to read them all because that's a lot of things, and everybody had, well, and you can all read it for yourself. And so we summarized those. We talked about the pros and the cons, the extra special features, like some online video platforms have voting and whether that's appropriate and things like that. Things to watch out for and workarounds for some of those problems or holes or whatever. So we also, along with all the virtual voting document, which summarizes at a high level pros and cons and stuff, we also made a whole bunch of documents that introduce you to how to use all those platforms. This is not done in a vacuum. We had a lot of help from other working groups. So I just want to take the time to thank everybody from the other working groups for helping us. We did all of these things, all of these platforms, which I don't even know how many commas I have. There's at least a dozen in there. We are still looking for help with Microsoft Teams. Nobody in our committee, our working group, or the other ones really has access to Teams, and we have access, but we don't know if we have the same permissions or accounts or setups or whatever that most people would have if they had a school-wide Microsoft Teams. So if you have the ability to help us do that, get in contact with somebody so we can round that out and do the last one. Also, I guess if you do have other things that you would like us to investigate, we're more than happy to do that. Just shoot somebody an email and it'll eventually get back to us. So this presentation that we're doing summarizes the virtual voting document. It is not a substitute for actually reading it. For the sake of time, a lot of things are very compressed. We've skipped a lot of the minutiae, a lot of the little details that really make it a proper, well-rounded solution. I'm going to get done with this slide. Go ahead to the next slide, Alex. So we will mosey on along to our first voting thing, which is the ratification ballot. So requirements for ratification ballot. And I'm sure at this point, since it's April 2nd, it's not even April 1st. Everybody is already well aware of all the requirements for ratification ballot, but we want to include them for completeness. So quorum is 75% of your active members. And that includes your alumni members, and the advisory board can declare people inactive. And this is actually the case for all of these, so that asterisk is not going to be there for the rest of them. In order to pass your measure, you have to have more than 3 times the number of yeses, and then the noes and abstentions. And in this case, abstention counts as noes, and it is not required to be done in person. That's been the case, well, for a long time. So it does not have to be done in person. A lot of schools that I know already don't do it in person. So questions to get you started on how to figure out how to do this online for your chapter is, how do you get your information to your members? The information on, what you're actually voting on. Is that via email or whatever? Are you going to have a discussion? Are you going to actually discuss as a chapter the different ballot measures? Or I guess the different amendments, not ballot measures. And then is that discussion going to be live? Is it going to be a Q&A format, whatever? And then what voting method is easiest for you? If you have, a smaller chapter, email might be easier than setting something else up, or you might need to set up a larger system because you have, 100 and some odd people voting, and that's going to be crazy with email. So those are the questions. Go ahead to the next slide. Best practices are, make sure you provide information to your members so they know what they're voting on. Also provide information on how voting works, especially with the ratification ballot, because the quorum is kind of weird, or not the quorum, but the voting is kind of weird in that abstentions count as noes, which a lot of people aren't really familiar with. Even if you do regular Robert's Rules voting, abstentions don't count as noes. So this is a special case. So make sure you provide that background. Tailor, when you're providing your information about the amendments, tailor it to your chapters. Try to make them understand why it affects them or their chapter or them as alumni or whatever. And then also make sure you keep track of who voted so that you can remind the people who haven't voted that they need to vote. You can hit them every couple of days with a reminder email or whatever. And you can also remind people that they can be declared inactive. And that might affect their ability to get stoles or whatever. And that, sometimes you can't get them to vote with the carrot, so you got to break out the stick and just hit them a couple of times. They're all easy ways to make quorum. You just have to be a little firm and threaten a little bit. Yeah, so, and it's one other thing with all these best practices. These are all recommendations. Our working group took a very descriptive approach and not a proscriptive approach. So like we said at the beginning, find something that works for you. We just try to do some upfront thinking so that you didn't have to think so hard. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we have 4 examples. We're only going to cover 3 of them, I think. So we had one example of, yeah, we're definitely going to cut some of these short because it's ratification ballot. So example one, we have current practice, which is what the chapter currently does. And in this case, in this example, the chapter met in person and they discussed all the changes with all their members, and then they all raised their hands to vote, and it was done. And so our recommendation for that is meet online or have a pre-recorded presentation. And if you're meeting online, you can have a live discussion, or you can, text or whatever in the chat, and then you can hold a vote. And if you have the ability to raise hands, like I guess Google doesn't, but some other things allow you to raise hands or put thumbs up or whatever, you can do that, or you can do it through a poll afterwards. Actually, no, that's the next example. Okay, well, that's okay. I'll go ahead and talk to the next example. You don't need to change the slide. You can change the slide if you want. Obviously, if your voting method has the ability to vote through your meeting method, your meeting method has the ability to vote through the meeting, do it. If not, you can always vote afterwards, which is our example 2. And so we will save time by just skipping over example number 2, because it's the exact same words, except it tells you to vote afterwards through an online method. Example number 3 is a chapter that potentially already did voting online, and so they send out an email document with information, background information. This is the change. This is, if you vote yes, this is what you're voting for. If you vote no, this is what you're voting for. All that fun stuff. And the members email back, because in this case they didn't have enough people to warrant, or didn't choose to do some other voting method like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms or whatever. And then obviously, like I said before, follow with email reminders, because sometimes you catch people at a bad time, and so you just want to, hit them with the stick a little, gently, not hazing, just poking them with the stick. There we go. And so there's no real change, except for the fact that in the creation of the informational document, the officers dry run it with the other officers. Like the president who went to convention or didn't or whatever, makes the thing, and then he gives it to the rest of his officers, and then they respond back with, I didn't understand this, you need to fix that, things like that. Example 4 is also a very similar example to example number 3, so we will not worry about the slide, except it's using like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms or whatever to do the voting. And so again, with that, the most important thing is with SurveyMonkey, use the unique links, which emails directly to people, so that way you can keep track of who voted and people don't vote twice accidentally. And also with Google, make sure that they're doing the login thing, required thing, which you can read all about in our supporting documentation. All right, Alex, let's go ahead 2 slides to candidate elections. Candidate elections. So candidate elections are kind of important. So we're actually going to spend a little bit longer on it. There's also some requirements that are interesting, so we'll get to those. Okay, so requirements for candidate election is quorum is 75% of your active student members, which does not include the alumni. And to elect a member, they have to have it's 3/4, and no or abstentions count as abstentions. So it's 3 times the number of yeses than the number of no's, but also the number of yeses has to be at least half of your active student members. These are all constitutional requirements. I'm just reminding you of them. The other requirement is it has to be done by secret ballot, and secret ballot does not mean necessarily that nobody knows who voted. It just means that the people who voted don't know what other people who voted meant. So like the person at the front of the room counting hands, he or she obviously knows who voted. So that's what secret ballot means for candidate elections. And your voting procedure is in your bylaws. It is also in the constitutional bylaws, sort of, through a policy document proviso, which we will talk about in the next couple of slides. And that is hard to find, and so we actually included it in the bottom of our working group document. So you can read the whole thing in its entirety. If you do not trust our interpretation of it, that's fine. Go challenge our interpretation and read it for yourself. The only other requirements are you have to start your candidate election meeting with a reading of the eligibility code, and you have to consider candidates' character individually. And also the other thing to keep in mind is no candidate should know the result until they are officially told by the chapter. So the people in the ballot or in the voting shouldn't be like texting their friends and being like, oh, hey, we just elected you or whatever. That's a no-no. And so that's really more for your members than for your officers. Okay, so questions to set up this for your chapter is it feasible for you guys to vote live? And how do you effectively summarize the information that you've obtained from your candidates, you know, like through interviews, through statement of purposes, all that stuff. How do you summarize that stuff effectively and give it to your members? How do you ensure discussion, which we'll talk about why you want to ensure discussion a little bit later. And are you voting in groups, as in like you clump 4 candidates together and vote on them as a group of 4, or are you going to vote on everybody individually? Obviously, if you're voting live, it speeds things up if you vote in groups, and we'll talk about that a little bit, that process a little bit later if you are unfamiliar. Well, I guess we'll talk about it even if you're not unfamiliar. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is the default candidate election process, which is in the provisos of the Constitution bylaw changes from a number of years ago. And this will be put into association policy at some point. But as far as we're concerned right now, it is still in force. And the thing to remember for all this is your chapter bylaws can specify a different procedure than this. Oh, it even says that right there. And so you amend your bylaws if you're doing it right now, and they get approved by the Executive Council, and then you're good. And there are some requirements for that. We won't talk about those right now because that's for reading later. So also requirements are voting has to be conducted by the president or a member of the advisory board, which is not your advisor. Well, it is your advisors, but it's not just your advisors. It also includes 3, your president, your vice president, and corresponding secretary. And then also voting could be conducted by an alumni member of your chapter. So those are the people who can conduct candidate elections. Those are the people in the front of the room counting the hands. Okay, next slide, please. So the default process, like I said, starts with the reading of the eligibility code, and then it mandates 2 rounds of voting with an optional 3rd round. The first round of voting, you vote on all the candidates, and this is where you can vote individually or in groups, and you should consider grad students separately than undergrad, which means you don't like group together grad students and undergrads. And the way groups work is if you have 4 people on the screen, you're talking about all 4 people, if any member wants to pull a person off and consider them separately, that's fine. You then take the remaining 3, and that's now your group, and then your 1 person that you pulled off is your next person you're going to vote on or whatever. And so that way, you know, if you have 3 people who are wonderful and 1 person who is a little bit less wonderful, you can talk about that less wonderful person separately, and the 3 people who walk on water can just go do they can just get elected easily without a lot of discussion. Then you have a 2nd round of voting after your 1st round, and that includes anybody who was not elected in the 1st round of voting. And you might as well at this point vote on everybody individually because it's much easier. Because these are already people who didn't get elected the first time, and so there's already going to be discussion. And consider juniors or seniors first, then juniors. That actually is a requirement. Whatever. And then if you can have a 3rd round of voting, which is optional, but you only have to do it if over 25% of the people want to consider any candidate who failed the 2nd round. So the 3rd round of voting is just for, you know, person A and person X and person Q or whatever, because those are the people that 25% of the members had said, I want to have a 3rd round for that 1 person. So this is not everybody. It's just those special people. So that's the default process. I know it's all riveting, so you're all very enthusiastic now, but let's get rid of that. Let's go on to best practices. So best practices for candidate elections is summarize the candidate information prior to your voting meeting. Even if you're voting and sending the information out, then obviously you have to summarize it. But even if you're voting in person, you should summarize it ahead of time, because that way you don't have to collate papers and rifle through everything live while everybody else is staring at you. It'll just speed everything up for everybody. And especially now that we are online, it's much harder to do that and still carry on the meeting. So do that ahead of time. And when you're summarizing, include whatever you normally do, and you might want to include extra stuff. But that includes like statement of purpose or photos or their major or whatever other information. Photos might be especially relevant right now since it's online, because people have had a lot less interaction with them face-to-face. And so a photo is probably more important now than ever. We'll remind you that secret ballot is only for voters, so the people counting can still see who voted. And remind everybody, all the voters, that candidate elections is an adult conversation. We're all mature adults, and these are not necessarily comfortable adult conversations because, you're talking about how that guy used to cheat on this exam 4 classes ago or whatever. And it's important for that stuff to come out, but it does make people uncomfortable. And so just remind everybody about that. And also, discussions don't leave the room. That's an easy way to get people to feel a little bit more comfortable discussing those things, is if everybody knows that whatever's said in that room or that virtual room or whatever doesn't leave. Also, discussions on candidates is really important, especially at certain times. You want to have that discussion. You want to make sure that, that one guy who saw him cheating 3 years ago actually speaks up. And if he's the only one who knows about it, if you don't have a discussion, no one else will know about it, and it's pointless at that point. And so if you can't have a full discussion because you are short on time, we have identified a minimum working set of discussions, which we won't get into a whole lot in this presentation, but it talks about basically how all the more superfluous discussions that you can cut out. So like although that group of 3 people that we still had who walk on water, we don't need to necessarily discuss them. But we have a process for how you can go about doing that to cut out most of the discussion for the first round and then keep it with just the people you need to discuss first round and then the second round discussion. But see the document for details on how that works, although we will touch on it slightly a little bit later. Candidate example number 1, please, Alex. So this chapter's current example is online. And so they send out their candidate information as a document to their members. That doesn't matter if it's a Word doc or PowerPoint or whatever. And then they vote online, but they vote online through a way that verifies that they know exactly who's voting. So whether that's a SurveyMonkey with unique links or Google Forms with verified emails, like you have to use your school email, so you have to be logged in, and then the Google form is checked so that it saves the person who did it. Not just typing in, this is my email, because who knows if that's right or not. And then you have a second round of voting, same process for candidates who did not get elected in the first round. So that's candidate example 1, cut and dry. There's no real change for the online because it already was online. Can we go to example number 2? Thank you. You're reading my mind. Perfect. All right. So candidate example number 2 is they had an election meeting where they vote in groups. It's the standard process. I'm not going to go into it. This chapter is choosing to do an online election meeting, which they happen to have a meeting platform that allows voting built in. So that would be things like Skype for Business or Zoom. So they have an actual way where in the actual chat you can click a button and vote. And so they just basically take their meeting and move online. So they have slides with pictures and information. They do discussion, and they do voting anonymously through their conference platform. Cut and dry, real easy. Can we go to example number 3, please? So this example is an online meeting without the ability to vote through the meeting platform. And so I won't talk about current practice because it's identical to example 2. And so what they do is they distribute additional information about candidates to members beforehand, because at this point, and the other thing with example 3 is they're trying to minimize discussion in the meetings so that the meetings themselves are shorter than they would otherwise have to be. So I guess this is 2 things combined into 1. And so they provided more information to their members ahead of time so their members could do their homework and read up on people. And they asked their members to identify, like email back saying, hey, I want to talk about person X or whatever, because I knew about him 3 years ago or whatever. And so anybody identified is discussed at that meeting. Other than that, they don't really do much discussion other than eligibility code and all that other stuff. But the only candidates for the first round that are discussed are the ones that people said, hey, I think I know something about this guy, I want to discuss him, which is really only the not so good stuff. It's not the, oh yeah, this person, he volunteers in an orphanage and he does all sorts of other philanthropic things and things like that. And so they do their online candidate discussion for their first round, and then that meeting ends, and they actually do voting online through one of the other voting platforms, just like in example 1. And then they actually have a second online meeting to discuss round 2. And then they do a second round of voting online through that same sort of platform. And one way you can kind of mush round 2 and round 2.5 for prep for round 3 is in that second round of voting, you can ask them to list, hey, if this or list anybody who, if they don't get elected, you would like to have a discussion for the third round. And that way, theoretically, that'll be a very small group of people that are having to be considered for the third round, and maybe even be 0. And so then you don't have to have a third meeting. Perfect. Officer elections, please. Oh boy. Alex, am I running out of time? I think so.
We're doing okay.
Okay, good. So I'll talk about officer elections. I will not talk about my fourth thing, which is regular voting. So officer elections. Quorum for officer elections is 50% of your active members, which includes alumni. You have at least the 5 positions in your constitutional bylaws. Your chapter bylaws may specify more. And that actually reminds me, I'm going to give you an overall. Check the constitutional bylaws, but more importantly, check your chapter bylaws, because chapters are allowed to make changes to all of these things. And so make sure you read them through to see if there's any other weird considerations you need to have for your voting for any of the things. Okay, so questions for your chapters for officer elections are: what is the nomination process? Is it just a, hey, I'm interested, or is there an application process or whatever? How do the nominees provide their platform to your members, which is the vote for me speech? Is it written? Is it recorded video? Is it a live speech in a video conference? Is there an opportunity for members to ask questions of the nominees and then have them respond? And how might you do that? Because you could do that over email or whatever if you wanted to. And then the next question is, do you have chapter discussion on the nominees prior to voting? Usually a lot of chapters in person, they have the nominees give their speeches, they kick them out of the room, they talk about them, and then they vote, and then they let them back into the room. And so are you going to have that, or is that not important? And then do you vote sequentially? So like you vote for president, and then you vote for vice president, and then you vote for whatever's next. Or you're going to vote all at once. There are benefits and drawbacks to this. Like, if you don't get elected president, you could then run for vice president, stuff like that. And then lastly, is your vote public, like the votes themselves, like raising hands with everybody's eyes open, or is it secret? And then if it's secret, how secret is it? Is it secret for everybody or just the people who are voting or whatever? So those are the questions that if you answer, you'll already have a good path forward. Next slide, please. So, like I said before, sequential voting allows members to run for additional positions if they don't make their first choice. Being able to actually see the candidates is good, so a live meeting is best. Recorded videos are also okay. A written statement is fine. I mean, it's better than nothing, but it doesn't really give you an actual feel, because some people might type a good story, but they can't walk the walk or whatever. And consider expanding your nominee information to more things than you would normally have. Again, like the pictures before, it's harder to interact with people online, and so you want to give them more information to kind of make up for the fact that you can't just talk with them for 30 minutes after an event some other time. People had a chance to mingle. Yeah, I guess. Oh, and also send out at least some of that information to your members before the meetings so they can look it over, maybe think of questions they want to ask or whatever, because again, they don't have the chance to interact with them during regular events normally, and so they won't have as much interaction with them. So they might be much less familiar than they otherwise normally would be. And also consider holding informational meetings on becoming an officer prior to nominations opening, where you might describe what the different positions are, what's involved with being an officer, allow people who are interested to ask questions of current officers. Because again, if somebody's interested, they might not, or normally they would, stay behind after another meeting or an event and ask the current president, hey, so what's it like being president? Is that something that I'd be good at, or do you think I should run for something else or whatever? And you can't do that. And so holding explicit meetings for that is a good way to kind of smooth that over. Okay, example number 1, please. So in this chapter, they held nominations over email. Their election meeting was held in person. They gave speeches, they kicked them out of the room, chapters discuss them, they vote, and then they keep going. And so their online solution was nominations via email. They hold an online meeting where basically the platform itself allows them to vote and kick people out. And in this case, if you're allowing people to see, you could raise hands in video with the consideration that I said before is no video, no vote is a bad answer. So find a way for people without video to vote if you're doing raise your hands. And the nice thing about a live meeting is it allows you to have discussion and all that good stuff. Okay, example number 2. Example number 2 is a chapter that did nominations via email. The nominees submit candidate statements. The candidate statements for all the nominees are distributed to all the members, and the voting is done online. And they obviously have no change because they're already online. Look at that. Wonderful. Number 3, please. Oh, I'm on number 3. I didn't see the slide change. I'm sorry. Okay. So this one is very similar in their current setup, but they chose. Wait, what's different? Okay, well, maybe this one isn't. Okay, let's ignore this slide since I don't think there's anything different in this slide. So obviously, if you go read the virtual voting document, example 3 will be different, I promise. This slide is just a bad example. All right, I had miscellaneous voting. We'll go ahead and do it. I'll touch on 2 things. So day-to-day online voting for committees, advisory boards, regular meetings, all that stuff. Requirements vary. Check your bylaws because there's different quorums, different thresholds for voting, all that good stuff. These are usually not required to be secret because you would normally do it by raising your hands or saying yes at a meeting. And sometimes they're not even required to be formally counted. Like motions, if obviously 75% of people say yes, and that makes it even easier because if you're raising your hand or doing a thumbs up in a meeting or whatever, it's much easier to just gauge, oh yeah, there's way more up thumbs than down thumbs. So that's it. Thank you all for suffering through my virtual voting. Like I said, there are plenty of other documents. You can read through them. We have lots of stuff for you. We look forward to you guys having successful voting because voting is important. I'm done.
That's right. Well, we'll get everything posted there. And if you have any questions for the final part of our discussion tonight for Neil, you can just drop them in the chat as well. Let's see. And is Natalie on the call now?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, excellent. And while I'm getting that pulled up, Natalie is a member of the New York Sigma chapter at Alfred University. She'll be graduating this year with degrees in mechanical engineering and chemistry. She served as vice president of New York Sigma last year and is currently serving as chapter president. She joined the student advisory board in 2020 and currently serves as secretary. She attended the 2018 and 2019 conventions and served as the chair of the Image and Marketing Committee at the 2019 event. Natalie, yours to go.
Thank you. So I'm going to keep this short and sweet. Apparently so short that I didn't write anybody's names on here. So thanks to Kavya, Bill, and Daniel for all of your help on this. You can go ahead to the next slide, Alex. Awesome. So oh boy, I also have been affected by Google Slides. We'll make do. So our group primarily went through and we tested a whole bunch of different platforms to figure out just what was going to work best for chapters. And so if you are focused on video conferencing and you want to see people's faces and you want to be able to get that kind of feedback from people's facial features and reactions, Zoom is what we figured to be the best choice. It had the clearest audio, it had the clearest video, and it also has additional capabilities for whiteboard, anonymous polling, and breakout rooms. It's free, it's easy to sign up for, it's very easy to use, it's quite intuitive. If you do not find it to be intuitive, there is a guide that will be published with all of the rest of this so that you can figure out how to use it and get up and started really quickly. The only drawback is that it is used by many schools and many businesses and even many other companies that are just doing live Zoom meetings. So we would suggest that maybe planning for your meetings to be outside of peak times, so not during the normal 9 to 5, and also considering time zones as well. So like 9 a.m. California time to, all the way through, just to make sure you catch everything and that you're not creating a problem with connectivity. You can go ahead to the next slide. So if you don't need video, if that's not something that's important for your group, you can go ahead with Discord. This is something that Daniel brought to our attention. I know this is used primarily in the gaming community, but it's also an excellent resource for those of us who are just looking for the ability to talk to each other. So it's got excellent quality audio for an unlimited number of users, or really as many as your computer can use. And it has capabilities for video conferencing for up to 10 users. So if you add people on Discord as your friend, you can set up a video chat with them for a small group. So this is great for if you want to have a separate chat with just officers. Usually it's less than 10. I know some of the larger chapters have significantly more, but this is a good option for that as well. It's also free and easy to sign up for. The only problem with Discord is that it does have a bit of a learning curve. And so you can reference the document that Daniel put together. It's very comprehensive. It goes through exactly what you need to do to set up your account, to get everything started, and to do essentially everything you would need to do with Discord. So this is great for somebody who maybe wants a video chat occasionally, but really just needs the audio. And so you can go to the next slide. And so just general guidelines for us, really, we just want to encourage all the users to reference the how-to instructions. We looked at a lot of different options for this. And so we also would recommend, if you're significantly more comfortable with Google Hangouts or Meet, WebEx, Skype for Business, Microsoft Teams, or BlueJeans, if you use that frequently and you're more comfortable with it, there's no reason to transition away from that. And if you kind of know those and are more comfortable with them but need more help with them, there are tons of how-to guides that are going to be uploaded with everything else. So everyone can reach out and figure out and use those to kind of guide them on their journey. And it's going to be different for every chapter. I think that's been the theme of the night. So we're going to be able to kind of help everybody get through it depending on their particular needs. The primary thing with video chat as opposed to in-person, you can take cues, you know when somebody's about to talk usually. That's not always the same over a video chat, and especially not over an audio chat. So to prevent students from talking over each other, we would really suggest utilizing your chapter parliamentarian if you have one. And if not, maybe you can encourage your secretary or another officer to act in this role for the time being. And we would just encourage them to kind of set up a way that works for your chapter specifically to make sure that students and other members are not talking over each other, especially since we are trying to encourage those kind of conversations around elections. It's super important, but we can't have everyone talk at once. So utilization of the mute and chat functions are great, like it has been mentioned before. And so we think that, just to iterate again, avoiding peak times, which usually works best for anyone. Evening meetings are pretty common at my chapter and other chapters that I've spoken with. So if you guys have any questions, I am on the student advisory board. You're more than welcome to reach out to me through email or reach out to SAB in general, and we can help you through this. So yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you, Natalie. And again, those how-to guides will be posted on the resources tab. And I'm going to find my way back to the proper, yeah, there we go, slideshow. Okay, all right. So I'm going to close this out tonight by discussing the alternative that we prepared for initiation fee payments. We're going to be utilizing the online store to do this. So basically, we sent out a questionnaire earlier in March and found out that 61% of our chapters that responded are currently collecting fees via cash or check. Great system if you can meet person face-to-face. Can't do that a lot of the times right now. And a lot of chapters don't have the framework set up to be able to pay fees directly. So we are providing the means to the store to do so. I'll demonstrate that in just a second because I've got the link ready for you all to see now. But basically, the electees will select their chapter on the online store, pay via credit card, just like they're buying anything else on there, like a t-shirt or a hoodie. And we at headquarters will keep up with the chapter portion that's paid in addition to the $55 national fee, and keep up with whoever pays as well and inform the chapter at a regularly scheduled way, and we'll figure out the means to do so as well. I've prepared the 3 separate pages required to do this. We can't list every chapter on one product page just due to the limitations of the store. But they're all tied back to back with each other, so you'll see that as well. And I'll have all these fees posted, fee pages posted to the Google site. And before you send out any link to your electees, I recommend ensuring that your chapter's amount is correct on the online store, because once they pay that, I can refund it or anything that's needed, but it would be best just to make sure they're paying the correct amount first. So I'm going to close this, and I think I've actually got it open down here. Yeah. Okay. So if you can all see this, this is the online store, and we've got a product page set up here that details the chapters from Louisiana Alpha through North Dakota Beta. As I mentioned, we have product pages for the other groups of chapters that just can't fit all on one product page, and we'll have all 3 of these links posted. Essentially, what an electee would do would be select their chapter, and we're going to require that they type their full name. They won't be able to proceed without it, and just add it to cart as normal. For chapters that are not interested in that or have not informed us of their initiation fee amount, if somebody were to check that out, say from Louisiana Alpha, it would show up as 0, and it's also showing up as sold out, so they can't proceed with that. So basically, only chapters that have indicated that they're interested in receiving this, as well as provided us the amount. So I recommend, again, once these links are posted on the Google site, to go in and make sure that your chapter's amount is correct right here for each individual initiate. And I'll watch out for any questions coming my way about that. And let's see. And I think that takes us up to the very end here. I know we've covered a lot of information tonight. I've not been able to keep up with the chat, but if there are any questions for our guest speakers or me, now would be the time. For those who've been helping me facilitate the discussion, are there any questions that have not been answered thus far? Hearing none at the moment. If there are any additional questions, you can go ahead and unmute real quick and we can try and answer those verbally if there's anything else. All right. So hearing none, I think that we are good to go for the evening. As we said many times, all of these resources and the background documentation